Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to take one set of 2 napkins and make some home decor items. So here is the Marilla napkin, and quite honestly I was getting ready to repurpose this, reuse it in some way, and then I had some inspiration. Decided I'm going to cover this box. Now, relatively simple. This has lots of great color. They're colors that will match my decor, and I can bling it up or make it my own to fit my decor. So as it happens, 1/2 of the napkin is perfect to fit on the box. Now I'm going to leave in some of the mistakes that I made, and you can learn the lesson as I do. Cutting this with the rotary cutter is awesome. It cuts so easily and straight and way faster than scissors. So I'm just getting the lay of the land, looking to see how I'm going to match this up. And quite honestly, in the end, you just have to go for it. So here I'm using fluid matte medium to adhere the napkin to the box. And I'm going to do one side at a time for control purposes, and I'm lining it up at the top and the bottom. I'm not too worried if it's not exact because I'll be dealing with that later. I'm using the saran wrap to press it down and get rid of the wrinkles. That really helps, and there's less friction than with your fingers. Just make sure there's no glue on the top. Now, did you see on the corner? I just ripped the napkin. I'm going to show you how to fix that up later as well. As I said, you're going to learn from my mistakes. Once the napkin's down, I am putting a coat of the fluid matte medium on the top. I know I'm going to do some overpainting on this later on, and I want to seal the top of the napkin and give it added strength as well. So I'm gluing this down, and this is a mistake. I find a better way of doing this. And you can look at both ways and decide which one works for you. They both worked in the end. You just have to make sure, because you're doing the sides, that you take time in between to dry. Now here I'm matching the napkin piece to that, and I'm gluing it down with a straight edge. Now that straight edge is not unseen, and I'm going to fix that. I'm going to show you a better way that really omits a lot of the excess and it doesn't show as much. So I'm gluing it down, waiting for the side to dry. Now here's where I do it right. I have this one panel and I'm looking at the napkin to see, okay, that's where that part of the napkin is, and I've decided that, I'm prioritizing doing this box. At this time, I was only going to do the one item, so I didn't care if I used up both of the napkins to get it just right. So here I'm just cutting off some of that excess instead of gluing it down. That's not going to quite match. Now, if it doesn't match perfectly, if the napkin that you've chosen doesn't match perfectly, just do each side separately, and then you can put color on the corners, and no one's going to be the wiser. So there is a workaround. Here's what I did, because I'm using 2 napkins and I'm prioritizing the use. I've lined up where it's going. Now, instead of getting a straight edge and gluing it down with the straight edge, what I'm going to do is water cut it. That gives you that deckled edge, and it blends almost unseen when you do it. They always say by the time you're done a project, you know how to do the project. For you, you're lucky, because I'll do the project first and you can learn from my mistakes. So here I'm water cutting it with my liner brush and just a little bit of water. And there we have this rough edge. And now when I line it up, I'm not really overlapping the napkin. When I overlapped parts of the napkin, it looked darker because it's got the double colors. And by water cutting it, as you see me doing here, I get rid of most of that. Working on something that is 3D is very difficult with the camera, so I apologize that I'm off camera for some of this, but we'll be back in right away. Now that I've got this perfectly situated, I'm going to glue this down. I use Liquitex Fluid Matte Medium. I buy it in a big container. That's how I get it the cheapest. But you could use Mod Podge if that's what you have, or whatever adhesive you have. So here I'm just lining it up, and it's almost seamless. Now, as I said, if it doesn't go all the way to the top or all the way to the bottom, don't worry, because we are going to solve that problem. Now, this box, it was a box from my wedding dishes many years ago, and I had gessoed it, planning to do some kind of treatment on it, and it sat just gessoed for a couple years. But I love the colors in this napkin. The dark navy in the background with the bright colors. And who doesn't love a floral? Now, if you opt to do the straight edge, don't worry, because we're going to overpaint. Now, remember that corner? I pulled it too tight and it ripped because, of course, a napkin is very fragile. So I'm just taking a piece of the navy from another part of the napkin and I just put it on there. And voila, it's disappeared. Now, I painted the bottom and the top, and I tried to match it to the navy that was in the napkin, and it was a dark navy, so I mixed the Prussian blue, one of my favorite colors, with black, and I did it with a makeup sponge. And then I'm rubbing it on the corners. I'm kind of edging it just like I edge my art journal page. So all the same techniques that you do on an art journal page, you can do on a home decor item. Now here's where the white is at the top, and again, I'm blending this in. Now the lid's going to go on that and it's going to cover it mostly, but because I put it on the bottom and the top, it looks like that was the design. I'm adding a little color inside. Now, if you didn't match your corners perfectly, you just did each panel separately, I would put some of the navy on the corners, and that will break up the pattern, and you've solved that problem. So here's the top, and I'm giving it the same color. Now on the bottom, I don't like it so flat, so I'm just stenciling with some black and a floral pattern that works. Really, no one's going to see it. Now I'm going to overpaint. So even if you had a straight edge, this kind of masked it. And I'm using white gesso and the colors that are in the napkin. I'm using quinacridone magenta, alizarin crimson, Naples yellow, Hooker's green, and I'm really globbing it on. This is giving a very painterly effect. I'm basically hitting where it is, but I'm adding some details, adding a little bit of color here. And I'm not overthinking this. I'm not even worried about the shape of the flowers. This is giving the illusion of the florals. I'm following the basic shape and design from the napkin and the colors, but I'm overpainting. Now later when I do the coasters, I will do the same techniques, and you'll get a little bit closer up view of when I'm doing the overpainting. But you know what? Just go for it. The eye sees it as a whole. Now, the one thing that I would recommend when you're overpainting and you're doing a project like this, you want all four sides to look the same. So allow yourself enough time to do the entire project, because you'll find that you are kind of in the flow and you'll be doing it in a certain way. If you stop and did it another day, you might be doing it slightly differently. And there's a lot of overpainting on here. Now on the top, I decided that I wanted to add some gold embellishment, and I'm using the TCW Tacky When Dry Medium. And I'm putting it through this Mums stencil on the top of my box. I'm using the palette knife and spreading it in. It's about the thickness of the gel medium, and it goes through the stencil really well. You just want to make sure that you wash it off your stencil when done. Now this is the hard part. This has to dry. I had some left over, so I decided I'm going to put it on the corners and see how that works. Back to the drying time. This took over an hour to dry. I had put it on fairly thick. You know it's perfectly dry when it goes perfectly clear. So here are the foil transfer sheets from the Crafter's Workshop. You could use these flakes as well, but I'm using this sheet because it's just simpler. You put the sheet on and you rub it on. Now, if it doesn't get perfect coverage, you're going to see me putting that back on and rubbing harder and moving on the sheet to get perfect coverage. And it worked really well on the corners. So lesson learned. TCW sells these foils in a lot of coils, and I know that NinnysNapkins also sells the Tacky When Dry medium as well as the foil transfer sheets. You get 12 of these sheets in each package, so you have lots to use. I love, love, love the shine that this gives to the project. Now I've given this a coat. There's the leftover sheet, so I can still use that. I've given this a coat of Minwax polyacrylic in the satin. Now the top, I decided I'm going to use the inspired word stencil and put the word imagine and create on the four sides of the top. I'm just lining it up and I'm using gold. If I was only doing one word, I would have done it with the Tacky When Dry medium, just like the top, but I didn't want to do each side and wait in between. Just edging it with gold with my makeup sponge, just to finish it off. As I was saying, I gave it a coat of Minwax polyacrylic varnish in satin. That gives it a shine and it protects everything. So if I'm going to have this in my studio, and things in my studio tend to get paint on them, and that'll allow me to wipe it off. Look at that beautiful cover and box. I love this so much. Here I'm giving a coat of the polyacrylic to the foil sheets. It did not dull the foil sheets, and it didn't lift the foil sheets, even though it hadn't been sitting for days. And here's the finished project. What a nice way, an inexpensive and easy way to turn a plain box into something special. So let's use the leftovers to make some coasters. These are wooden coasters, but you could put them on the cardboard coasters to make them temporary. And I'm just using the template there on the napkin to get an interesting, colorful part of the napkin. I'm going to do these coasters fairly simply. I'm going to follow a lot of the same steps that I did in covering the box. I'm using the fluid matte medium on there, positioning the napkin, using the saran wrap to get rid of wrinkles, and then a coat of the matte medium again. And then I'm letting it dry. These are wooden coasters and I got them from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description box below. I also have purchased the cork that goes under them. I just don't have it for this at this time. Once it's completely dry, and you want to make sure it's dry, I'm using a sanding block to sand off the excess edges. This works really well, and you can go pretty rough, but you want to make sure A, that it's completely dry, and B, that it's completely adhered to the edge. So you may want to flip it up and double check that everything is completely stuck. So now I am going to overpaint this. And again, I'm using the Naples yellow, the Hooker's green, the alizarin crimson, and white gesso. And I'm just using a small round brush or angle brush, and I'm just globbing it on. Sometimes I have 1 or 2 colors on the brush at the time, some gesso and some color, or the Naples yellow and the green. And I'm just following on here. This is making it look very painterly, less like you've glued on a napkin and more like you hand painted these. And while this is sped up, I really didn't spend a lot of time on it. I didn't overthink it too much and worry. Got a little paint on there, but because it's all sealed, I was able to get rid of that. And nobody's going to know if you deviate from the exact pattern of the napkin. Nobody's going to know because they don't have the original napkin. By overpainting, I'm brightening the colors somewhat and adding a little more contrast with a little more white than was on the napkin. This napkin is fairly dark, which is why I struggled with it, even though I love the colors. I don't even cover every flower that is on the napkin. Some are left unpainted. And that leads to variation and makes it interesting to look at. Every napkin's a little bit different, and again, I'm doing all the coasters, and since they're a set, I did that in one sitting as well. If you compare this to the box, I did a little bit different stuff on the box. Not better or worse, just different. I also used some purple because there was a little bit of purple in that. On one of the coasters, there wasn't enough of the pink, so I actually added flowers that weren't there. Now I'm edging with that same mix of Prussian blue and black. I don't want to see the raw wood of the coaster. And this is also edging the top of the coaster. You get that muted, smoky edge. I really love that. But as I said, all the same steps that I would do on a page I've done on the coasters. There I had some lifting up, so I've had to re-glue it down. I decided to add a sentiment, so I went to my short and sweet sentiment pack. This sentiment I'd actually had printed out on rice paper. And I'm gluing that down with the fluid matte medium. The rice paper doesn't go completely translucent, so you do see that it's there, but I like the added words, inspiration words. I gave this a coat of black gesso on the back. I will be putting the cork on when I get it from Amazon. And here I'm outlining it with my black Posca pen. I'm going to be using Polyvine varnish for this, and I end up using the heavy duty wood varnish. All the Polyvine varnishes are supposed to be heat resistant, but the heavy duty wood one is the best product to use for that. And since I want to be able to put a hot coffee cup on here, I don't want it to stick. Here I've decided to edge this with gold on top of the dark, just to bling it up. I've splattered this with gold. And then there's that little bit of yellow in the pattern, and that just makes everything work together. The Polyvine varnish does come, I believe, out of the UK, but you can get it from NinnysNapkins.com, and she ships internationally. I decided after adding the gold that I wanted to go around the sentiment with the gold, so I got out my fine line applicator bottle, which has been sitting unused for many, many months and continued to work well. It wasn't plugged and I had no trouble using it, so that's a win in my book. So back to the varnish. You want to make sure that your paint completely dries. And once it has completely dried, you're going to put on at least 2 coats of the wood varnish. I put the 3 actually of the heavy duty wood varnish. Now, you're going to see, I'm going to show you the difference between the Minwax satin and this one, which is dead flat finish. And when they mean dead flat, it is flat. There is no shine. The problem with that, I like shine. I like a little bit of shine, so I usually use satin, and you can get it in a satin finish. The dead flat also mutes or dulls the shine of any gold that you have in there. So it's great if you want that dull finish, that very, very matte finish, but it will dull anything that's metallic looking. So here is the dead flat, and then I use the satin, the Minwax polyacrylic on the container, and you can see the difference. This feels really good. I'm going to let this cure, and then I'm going to start using it with my coffee cup. Now, you know those leftover bits? I'm putting it in my accidental art journal, making marvelous out of the discarded. And I'm just adding whatever little bits onto this composition book. And you'll see how I turn that into a beautiful page. Here are close-ups of the both finished projects. I really love how this napkin covered the box and made these beautiful coasters. Go in your stash, see what you can find. Go get creative.